San Francisco, October 12, 1967. 8:17 p.m. San Francisco's Chinatown carried the scent of star anise and rain that Thursday evening. A thin coastal fog pressed against the upper windows of Grant Avenue, softening the neon signs into halos of red and gold. At precisely 8:17 p.m., inside the narrow dining hall of the Golden Dragon restaurant, porcelain cups clicked against saucers, while steam rose in pale ribbons from bowls of wonton soup. The air held the mingled fragrance of soy sauce, ginger, roasted duck, lacquered in honey glaze. Ceiling fans rotated lazily, pushing warmth across the lacquered wooden tables, polished by decades of elbows and conversations. A radio behind the counter murmured faint Cantonese melodies beneath the steady percussion of cleavers striking cutting boards in the kitchen. In booth 7, beneath a paper lantern painted with cranes, Bruce Lee sat alone. He was 26 years old, slight in frame, dressed in a dark tailored jacket that concealed more than it revealed. His posture was upright, yet relaxed, as if his spine were aligned with something invisible and immovable. Before him lay a small plate of chow mein and a leather-bound notebook opened to a page filled with compact handwriting. His pen moved occasionally, recording thoughts between bites. Few in the room recognized him. Some knew him as a local instructor. Others had heard rumors, demonstrations, private lessons, whispers of speed too quick for the eye to follow. Yet to most diners that night he appeared simply as a slender man eating dinner in silence. Outside, tires hissed across damp pavement. Inside, porcelain chimed. Conversations drifted from table to table in low currents. At 8:23 p.m., the restaurant door opened with deliberate force. A rush of colder air swept in, stirring napkins and lifting the edge of the paper lantern above booth 7. Heads turned instinctively toward the entrance. The figure who stepped inside filled the doorway before he even moved. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed close to 250 pounds. Broad shoulders pressed against the seams of his corduroy jacket. His neck was thick as a tree trunk, his hands heavy and blunt from years on wrestling mats. He was known in local gym circles as a regional champion, powerful, immovable, a man accustomed to applause when he entered a room. His boots struck the wooden floor with slow, unhurried authority. The hostess approached, offering a polite bow. He barely nodded in return. His eyes scanned the dining hall with casual ownership, lingering on faces that quickly looked away. Then they stopped. Booth 7. He had heard the name before. In locker rooms and back alley gyms, whispers had carried stories of a small Chinese instructor claiming that speed and structure could overcome size. The wrestler had laughed at those stories. He had built his life on leverage, on weight, on the simple equation that mass multiplied force. And there sat the man, thin wrists, narrow shoulders, calmly writing between bites of noodles. The wrestler's lips curved into something between amusement and disdain. He walked across the room without asking permission and stopped beside the booth. His shadow stretched over the table, covering the notebook. Bruce Lee did not look up immediately. He finished the sentence he was writing. He placed the pen gently along the crease of the notebook. Only then did he lift his gaze. The wrestler's voice carried easily across the dining hall. "So you're the fighter." Several nearby conversations faltered. Chopsticks paused mid-air. Bruce's expression did not change. "I teach," he replied evenly. The wrestler's eyes traced Bruce's arms, his narrow torso. He exhaled through his nose, a sound half laugh, half dismissal. "You're too small to fight." The words did not explode. They settled into the room like dust. Yet something in their tone, public, deliberate, tightened the atmosphere. Even the kitchen sounds seemed momentarily distant. Bruce regarded him without hostility. His gaze was steady, not confrontational, but precise. "Size is a matter of measurement," he said quietly. "Fighting is a matter of timing." A faint ripple of curiosity moved through the diners closest to the exchange. The wrestler's jaw tightened. "Timing?" he repeated. Timing doesn't matter when you're outweighed by 100 pounds. Bruce closed his notebook. Water, he said, does not outweigh the rock. Yet over time, it shapes it. The wrestler gave a sharp laugh, loud enough to echo against the lantern-lit ceiling. I don't need time. He placed a heavy hand on the edge of the table, causing the porcelain dishes to tremble. Show me. The request was not a question. It was a demand made for the benefit of every listening ear. For a brief moment, no one moved. The ceiling fans continued their slow rotation. Outside, a car horn sounded faintly in the fog. Bruce rose from the booth. He was indeed smaller, by nearly a foot in height and over 100 pounds in weight. Yet when he stood, something subtle shifted in the geometry of the space. His shoulders relaxed further. His breathing slowed. His hands hung loosely at his sides, not clenched, but alive with readiness. He stepped away from the table to clear a narrow space between booths. The wooden floorboards creaked beneath the combined weight of anticipation. The wrestler rolled his shoulders once, flexing thick forearms. He did not adopt a formal stance. He relied on instinct, on mass, on the confidence of never having been physically overpowered. Around them, perhaps 30 diners watched in absolute silence. Bruce's voice was calm. You believe strength is weight, he said. It is, the wrestler replied. Bruce tilted his head slightly. It is only one part. A single heartbeat stretched long in the quiet restaurant. Then the wrestler lunged. Chapter 2. The space between heartbeats. The movement began with a surge of mass. The wrestler stepped forward, intending to seize the smaller man by the collar and demonstrate with effortless force the futility of his philosophy. But the space he aimed for was no longer occupied. Bruce shifted not backward but slightly to the side, his lead foot rotating just enough to redirect the line of attack. His body did not retreat, it dissolved from the path of impact. In the same fraction of a second, his hand moved. Observers later disagreed on what they saw. Some believed it was a blur. Others insisted they saw nothing at all, only the result. Bruce's fist traveled no more than a few inches. It was not a wide swing, not a dramatic arc. It was a short, direct line driven by alignment rather than momentum. His structure transferred force from the floor, through his hips, into a single, precise point. The contact landed squarely against the wrestler's chest, just below the sternum. There was a sound, not a crack, not a thud, but a sharp exhalation, forced from lungs unprepared for interruption. The wrestler's forward motion halted as if a switch had been flipped. His eyes widened, confusion overtaking aggression. His body staggered backward 3 full steps before his heel struck the leg of a nearby chair. Silence deepened. The entire exchange had lasted less than 5 seconds. Bruce did not pursue. He did not add a second strike. His hands returned to his sides as though nothing had occurred. The wrestler attempted to inhale. The air came in shallow fragments. His arms, once poised to dominate, now hung uncertainly. He looked down at his own chest as if trying to understand what invisible mechanism had displaced his certainty. A chair scraped somewhere in the room, then froze mid-sound. The hostess stood rigid near the entrance. A waiter held a teapot suspended above a cup, unmoving. Bruce spoke softly, his voice steady enough to carry. Strength without structure collapses, he said. Power without control exposes itself. The wrestler's breathing gradually steadied, though the color had drained from his face. He straightened, slower this time, no longer towering but merely standing. He studied the smaller man in front of him, not with ridicule now but with recalibration. What was that? He asked, the edge gone from his tone. Bruce met his gaze without triumph. Efficiency. The word hung in the lantern-lit air. Chapter 3. The weight of silence. No applause followed. No cheers broke the tension. The room remained suspended in a quiet more profound than noise. The wrestler stepped back fully, creating distance not out of strategy but respect. He flexed his fingers once, testing his own steadiness. Whatever had struck him had not felt heavy. It had felt exact. "I underestimated you," he admitted. Bruce inclined his head slightly. "We all underestimate what we do not study." The wrestler gave a short nod. It was not submission in humiliation, but acknowledgment in clarity. Without further challenge, he turned toward the door. Each step he took toward the exit was slower than the one before. The heavy boots that had announced dominance now carried reflection. When the door opened again at 8:29 p.m., the cool fog returned briefly, then vanished as it closed behind him. Inside the Golden Dragon restaurant, breath returned to lungs in gradual increments. Conversations resumed in hushed tones. Chopsticks lifted once more, though hands trembled slightly as they did. Bruce returned to booth 7. He sat down with the same composure with which he had risen. He opened his notebook to the unfinished page. For a moment he paused, listening to the rhythm of the room settling back into itself. Then he wrote a single line. No one leaned close enough to read it. He finished his meal without haste. At 8:41 p.m., he placed cash beneath the porcelain plate, closed the notebook, and stood. He bowed gently to the hostess on his way out, as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Outside, Chinatown's neon glow shimmered against damp pavement. The fog had thickened, swallowing shapes into silhouettes. Bruce walked into it without escort, his steps light, unhurried. In the days that followed, the story moved quietly through San Francisco's gyms and teahouses. It traveled not through newspapers or cameras, but through memory. 30 witnesses became 40 in the retelling, though none disputed the brevity of what had happened. Some spoke of speed, others spoke of shock, a few spoke of philosophy. Years later, when Bruce Lee's name would echo across continents, the incident at the Golden Dragon would resurface in whispers, an evening when mass met precision and discovered its limit. No plaque marked the booth, no official record preserved the timestamp. Yet among those who had been present, the lesson endured not as spectacle, but as clarity. Power is not proven by volume. It is revealed in restraint. And on that October night in 1967, within the narrow lantern glow of a Chinatown restaurant, a quiet man demonstrated that the greatest force is often the one that moves the least. The space between heartbeats. The movement began before most in the room understood that it had begun. At 8:27 p.m., beneath the low amber glow of paper lanterns, the wrestler shifted his weight forward. It was a subtle transfer at first, the kind that precedes a grapple on a mat, when one body commits to overpowering another. His right boot pressed into the wooden floorboards. The tendons in his neck tightened. His shadow expanded across the table like a dark tide advancing. He did not raise his fists in ceremony. He did not circle. Men of his discipline did not rely on spectacle. They relied on contact, on the certainty that once their hands closed around an opponent, physics would finish the argument. His arm shot forward, wide and confident, fingers opening to seize cloth and bone. But the space he reached for no longer contained what he expected. Bruce Lee did not retreat in panic. He did not stumble backward. Instead, his body rotated on a narrow axis, a small pivot of the lead foot that altered the entire geometry of the encounter. The wrestler's grasping hand met nothing but displaced air. The motion was economical. No flourish, no wasted effort. It was as if Bruce had stepped into a pocket of stillness that existed just outside the line of attack. In that same breathless fragment of time, his posture aligned. Observers would later struggle to describe what followed. Some insisted they saw a strike. Others swore his hand barely moved at all. A waiter would claim he only noticed the wrestler's body recoil, not the action that caused it. Bruce's fist traveled scarcely more than 3 inches. There was no dramatic wind-up. No backward draw for momentum. The force did not originate in the arm. It rose from the floor, through the heel, through the coiling of the hips, through the spine held in quiet structure, and condensed into a single forward release. The impact landed squarely against the wrestler's chest, just below the sternum, where breath is gathered and guarded. The sound that followed was not the crack of bone nor the thud of flesh. It was the involuntary expulsion of air from lungs abruptly emptied. The wrestler's eyes widened, not in pain alone, but in disbelief. His forward surge halted mid-intention. The massive frame that had moments earlier carried certainty now faltered as though its internal balance had been quietly dismantled. He stumbled backward. One step, then another, then a third, heavier than the rest. A wooden chair scraped violently against the floor as his heel collided with it. The vibration traveled across the boards beneath the diner's feet. Porcelain trembled against lacquered tables. Silence deepened into something almost sacred. Bruce did not advance. His fist had already returned to rest at his side. His shoulders remained relaxed, his breathing unchanged. There was no visible strain in his expression, no triumph in his gaze. He stood as he had stood before, calm, contained, present. The wrestler attempted to inhale. The breath came shallow, fractured. His diaphragm spasmed under the precision of the strike. He raised a hand instinctively to his chest, not in theatrical agony, but in reflexive confusion. He had expected collision. He had encountered interruption. For a man accustomed to overpowering resistance, the sensation was foreign. There had been no grappling exchange, no struggle of strength against strength, no test of endurance. There had only been a brief contact, and the undeniable result. The restaurant remained motionless. 30 witnesses held their breath as if any sound might shatter the fragile equilibrium now suspended in the room. A ceiling fan continued its slow rotation above them, indifferent to hierarchy. Steam from a bowl of soup drifted upward in a pale ribbon between the two men. Bruce's voice broke the silence, low and steady. "You committed everything forward," he said, "and left nothing to recover with." The wrestler's jaw flexed as he fought to study his breathing. His pride resisted the interpretation, yet his body confirmed it. He had surged with weight, assuming mass would dictate outcome. He had not considered interruption at the root of movement. "What did you do?" He managed, his tone stripped of earlier derision. Bruce met his gaze evenly. "I met you at the moment before force became momentum." The words were not boastful. They were explanatory. The wrestler tested his footing. His legs responded, though less confidently than before. The room watched the recalibration occur in real time, the subtle shift from aggression to analysis. Bruce continued. His hands relaxed at his sides. "Power is not the size of the engine," he said. "It is the alignment of its parts." The wrestler glanced down at his own chest again, as if expecting to find a visible mark that would justify the sensation. There was none. No dramatic bruise, no torn fabric, only the memory of precision delivered without excess. He had outweighed this man by more than 100 pounds. And yet, in less than 5 seconds, his certainty had been dismantled without spectacle. A spoon slipped from someone's hand at a nearby table and struck a plate with a sharp metallic ring. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Still, Bruce did not move closer. The demonstration was complete. He had not chased advantage. He had not compounded dominance. Efficiency, once proven, required no repetition. The wrestler drew a deeper breath at last. Air filled his lungs more steadily now. With it came something heavier than pain, recognition. He had not been overpowered. He had been out-timed. The difference settled over him with undeniable weight. In the narrow space between heartbeats, where intention becomes action, Bruce Lee had occupied a fraction of time the larger man did not know existed. And in that fraction, the argument had ended. The weight of silence. For several seconds after the impact, no one in the Golden Dragon restaurant moved. Steam continued to rise from forgotten bowls. A ceiling fan turned with slow mechanical patience. Beyond the fogged windows, headlights drifted past like distant constellations. Inside, 30 witnesses stood suspended between disbelief and comprehension. The wrestler remained upright, but something fundamental had shifted. The aggression that had filled his shoulders minutes earlier had drained into a guarded stillness. He inhaled carefully now, measuring the depth of each breath. His chest rose and fell with controlled caution, as though rediscovering a rhythm he had taken for granted. Bruce Lee stood exactly where he had finished the motion. His hands were open, relaxed. His gaze did not challenge. It observed. There was no second strike, no pursuit, no exhibition of advantage. The absence of follow-up was, in its own way, more decisive than the contact itself. A waitress near the counter lowered the teapot she had frozen mid-pour. Porcelain finally touched wood. Somewhere in the kitchen, a cleaver resumed its steady rhythm against a cutting board. The world, slowly, permitted itself to continue. The wrestler looked at Bruce again, this time not from above, but directly into his eyes. The earlier amusement was gone. What remained was recalculation. "I've faced heavier men than you," he said quietly, more to himself than to the room. "Stronger men." Bruce inclined his head slightly. "Strength is visible," he replied. "Structure is not." The wrestler swallowed. His pride wrestled against the evidence of his own body. He flexed his fingers, rolled his shoulders, tested his balance. Nothing was broken, nothing torn. Yet the certainty that had entered with him at 8:23 p.m. no longer existed. The crowd felt it. There had been no dramatic slam against the floor, no shattered furniture, no spectacle for applause. Only a brief surgical interruption of force that left a 250-pound athlete stepping backward in stunned retreat. The wrestler exhaled fully, this time without strain. "I underestimated you," he said. The words were plain, not theatrical, not forced. They carried the weight of recognition. Bruce's expression did not soften into triumph. It remained composed, almost distant. "We all do," he answered. "Until we look closer." The wrestler gave a single nod. It was not submission. It was acknowledgement. The quiet agreement between men who understand that something real has occurred. He stepped back once more, increasing the distance between them. The restaurant floorboards creaked under his boots, but the sound no longer announced dominance. It marked reflection. Without another word, he turned toward the entrance. At 8:29 p.m., the door opened again. Cool fog slipped inside, brushing against warm lantern light before dissolving. For a brief moment, the wrestler paused at the threshold. He did not look back in anger. He looked back once in consideration. Then he stepped out into the mist. The door closed. Inside, breath returned to the room in gradual waves. Conversations resumed, though quieter than before. Chopsticks lifted cautiously, as though the air itself required gentler movement. Bruce remained standing for a moment longer. He surveyed the room not as a conqueror, but as a teacher ensuring calm had been restored. His eyes met those of the nearest table. A slight nod reassured them. The tension ebbed. He returned to booth 7. The notebook lay where he had left it, open to unfinished thoughts. He sat with the same unhurried grace with which he had risen. He adjusted the porcelain plate slightly, as if restoring symmetry. For several seconds he did nothing. Then he picked up his pen. The restaurant's ordinary sounds resumed their quiet rhythm, murmured conversations, soft clinks of ceramic, the muted rush of oil in the kitchen. Outside, a streetcar bell echoed faintly through the fog. Bruce wrote a single sentence. No one saw the words. No one asked. At 8:41 p.m., he placed several folded bills beneath his plate. He closed the notebook and slipped it into his jacket. Rising from the booth, he bowed gently to the hostess, who returned the gesture with newfound reverence. He stepped outside into Chinatown's narrow corridor of light and shadow. The fog had thickened. Neon signs shimmered against wet pavement. His figure moved through the haze without urgency, absorbed gradually by the city's quiet pulse. In the days that followed, the story traveled through San Francisco not by headlines, but by recollection. It passed between gym lockers, across tea shop counters, through whispered retellings in back rooms scented with incense and liniment oil. 30 witnesses became storytellers. Each described the same essential truth. The confrontation had lasted less than 5 seconds. No one could fully describe the strike. But all remembered the silence afterward. Years later, when Bruce Lee's name would resonate far beyond Chinatown, that October evening would resurface in memory, a night when weight met precision and discovered its boundary. There is no plaque marking Booth 7. No official record confirms the time. Yet for those who were present, the lesson required no inscription. Force announces itself loudly. Mastery speaks once, and then returns to stillness.